Hi, this is my report on case study 2 for approximate nearest neighbor. It's also known as Ann. Please forgive me for my voice. I'm getting over a cold right now. Alright, beginning with what is Ann? What did we use it for? Why is there something like this that exists? Well, it's pretty easy. It calculates the exact, or it deals with calculating nearest neighbor, but not to an exact dimension. Exact is when you use KN, which calculates the exact distance, and it's a very hard number. So when you have high dimensional data, you end up getting long processing times. For example, if I were to do something like that on my laptop with, say, 20 variables and a million observations, I'd be waiting until probably tomorrow to get the results from that. So that's where the dimensionality reduction process comes in. So what it does, instead of a hard line that says, hey, this is my neighbor, it goes, well, if he's close enough, then I'm going to call him my neighbor. It's kind of like when you live in a cul-de-sac. When the house isn't necessarily right next to you, but he may live one or two houses down, you'd still call him your neighbor. So it's been found that few methods are better than brute force, which this ANN uses a brute force with a very thick, and I'm doing air quotes here, gray line that it works with. And then that gray area is where you find it speeding itself up, because it's close enough in there, it just accepts it. It doesn't have to calculate out the exact distance to say, hey, he's here or he's not part of this group. It works very well with dynamic data, which means data that's constantly evolving or changing real time. For example, credit card data would be a good one. Trying to figure out if this guy's a good credit risk or not. You don't have all day to make a decision. Most websites, when you apply for a credit card, give you results within 60 seconds. It's also dependent upon your classification needs, whether you want to do a nearest neighbor or you want to do some other classification. And results response needs are greater than accuracy needs, because the one thing about AND that you do sacrifice is that accuracy. You accept a little more tolerance in terms of fault than with KNN. So the data used for this case study was facial expression recognition, and it's located at the link as you see. This data was comprised of approximately, let's just say rounded up, 36,000 observations. They were squares of 48 by 48 pixels in grayscale of a face that was exaggerated, and it was one of the 7 that were anger, disgust, fear, happy, sad, surprise, and neutral. So they had these models make those faces, and they took the caption, and at that point in time they labeled it. So all the data is labeled. There's no missing data, which is awesome. And the faces have been normalized, so in terms of, they were pretty centered in the image itself, so it minimized the amount of white space, as well as they were taken with a white background, so I didn't have any noise to deal with, like some random tree being in the background of this picture and throwing off this face. I split the data set using built-in functions in R, won a 70% split, so my training set was 25,121 observations, and my test set was 10,776. So it had 2 columns. The original column, it was labeled emotion, and you see the 00246. Well, that stands for what kind of face that was. So a 0 was anger, and 2 was fear, and then finally, what do we have? Sad and neutral. Neutral is no expression at all. You're just neither happy nor sad. It's just your average sitting face. So the pixels were the picture when the data was processed, and those pixels were turned into numbers. So it was a string type character, and it had, when I entered it, it turned into a factor with 34,043 different levels, which was a lot. Created high dimensions for my data. Stuff that this was perfect for dealing with AND, because if I tried to run this and anything else, this would have taken probably forever and a day. This is the experimental results I got. I did a cross comparison after running everything. I ran the algorithm and as a KNN, and you do that by modifying the EPS, which I set to 0, which pretty much tells the function, hey, treat this as k nearest neighbor, I want the exact distance. So after running AND on a few different ones, I played with different variables from the k size to the EPS size. I ended up landing on 0.999 for EPS, and that defines your gray area on that circular border for nearest neighbor. So I give it a pretty fat, broad, general border to deal with. And I had it do 40 different for the K, and that's for trees wise, and it looked very well. In terms of response, it was the best one that gave me the best accuracy, so that's the one I decided to go with. In KNN, I ran everything except, like I said, I changed the EPS to 0. So keeping everything else the same and just changing that factor, this is what we have here. We have a runtime for the K nearest neighbor of 5.235 seconds and of 3.297 seconds. Same exact data sets, everything else the same, but just to find that exact distance required that much more additional time. And as you can see, the error rates were pretty much the similar with the results here. Just looking at that, you're like, I see numbers similar in size. So this is what happened when I did that. My accuracy on the K nearest neighbors was a 0.2344, and my AND accuracy was a 0.2347. We're talking about 3/10,000ths of a difference. So for that difference, what does that actually equate to in emotions that it correctly identified? Well, AND actually identified 3 more correct emotions over KN while running at 159% faster. That's the difference between KNN and ANN in a nutshell right there, is your performance metric. It's doing the same exact thing with a slight difference in accuracy, and you're getting pretty much 1.5 times faster. Thank you, and that was my presentation.